6:47 a.m., April 19, 1945, Major General Walter Grabmann affixed his signature to Operational Order 1124F at Luftwaffe headquarters, nestled deep within the Harz Mountains. The document contained 7 paragraphs, outlining tactical instructions for the dwindling Luftwaffe fighter units. But paragraph 3, that's where history was made. Made history, not for what it achieved, but for what it admitted. 4 sentences that laid bare the complete psychological collapse of what was once the world's most feared air force. The sentences, chilling in their brevity, read, "All remaining fighter operations will avoid areas with confirmed P-51 Mustang patrol activity. Units encountering Mustang formations will disengage immediately and relocate to secondary operational zones. No offensive operations will be initiated against bomber formations escorted by identifiable P-51 aircraft. This directive supersedes all previous engagement protocols." Read that again. The Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring's once thought invincible air force, the organization that had terrorized Europe from 1939 to 1943, issued an official order telling its pilots to run away from P-51 Mustangs. Not a tactical withdrawal, not strategic repositioning. Run away, avoid contact, disengage immediately. And what made this order so devastating wasn't just what it said. It was what it meant. This was surrender, is surrender without uttering the word surrender, is surrender while still technically at war. Surrender to a single aircraft type that had broken the Luftwaffe's psychology so completely that their final operational directive was essentially, if you see a P-51 Mustang, turn around and fly the other direction. And here's what makes this moment historically crucial. When Directive 1124F was declassified in 1993, historians unearthed something extraordinary in the attached annexes. Grabmann had included a 23-page analysis explaining why this directive was necessary. An analysis that reads like a confession, like a military commander desperately trying to justify the unjustifiable, trying to explain how the Luftwaffe went from dominating European skies to officially ordering pilots to avoid combat with a single American fighter. That analysis remained classified for 48 years, and when it finally became public, it revealed something that changes how we understand the air war over Europe. The Luftwaffe didn't lose because they ran out of aircraft, or pilots, or fuel. They lost because they ran out of psychological capacity to keep fighting an opponent who was objectively superior in every measurable way. And that opponent was the North American P-51 Mustang. Let me show you what Grabmann wrote in that 23-page analysis, because it's not just military history, it's the documentation of an empire's air force admitting they were beaten by American industrial democracy, and the specific reasons why are more devastating than you can imagine. Grabmann began his analysis with a statistical comparison that explained why Directive 1124F was inevitable. He had access to complete Luftwaffe combat records. From January 1944 through April 1945, 16 months of data, and what that data showed was apocalyptic in engagements between German fighters and P-51 Mustangs. The loss ratio was 4.7 to 1 in favor of the Americans. For every P-51 shot down, Germany lost 4.7 aircraft, but that's the overall average. When you isolated engagements involving experienced American pilots with more than 15 combat missions, the ratio skyrocketed to 7.2 to 1. For every experienced American P-51 pilot killed, Germany lost 7.2 aircraft, and when you looked at the top American aces, flying Mustangs, the ratios became almost unbelievable. George Preddy, 2683 victories, mostly in P-51s. John Meyer, 24 victories. Urban Drew destroyed 2 Me-262 jets in a single mission, flying a P-51. The list went on, page after page, of American pilots achieving kill ratios that German commanders initially dismissed as propaganda. But Grabman's analysis went deeper. He identified exactly why the P-51 Mustang was unbeatable, not just better, unbeatable. And his reasoning is what broke the Luftwaffe's will. He listed 7 specific capabilities, 7 advantages, 7 reasons why Directive 1124F was the only rational response left. Advantage 1, range. The P-51D, with drop tanks, had an operational combat radius of 825 miles. That's 1,650 miles. Round trip. German fighters averaged a 350-mile combat radius. The FW-190D could push 520 miles in optimal conditions, but 825 miles. That was impossible by German engineering understanding. Grabman wrote, "The Mustang's range makes it omnipresent. Our pilots report encountering P-51s over Berlin, over Vienna, over Dresden, over targets we believed beyond enemy fighter range. This creates psychological pressure that traditional combat doctrine cannot address. The enemy is everywhere. Our pilots have no sanctuary. But here's what made the range advantage utterly crushing. American P-51 pilots could escort bombers all the way to the target and back. German pilots had to take off, climb to intercept altitude, engage in combat, and return to base before running out of fuel. They were operating on a knife edge. One navigational error, one unexpected headwind, one dogfight that lasted 3 minutes too long. They'd run out of fuel and either bail out or attempt a dead stick landing. And American intelligence knew this. So P-51 pilots developed a tactic that Grabman called the most psychologically devastating of the war. They would wait until German fighters had expended ammunition, attacking bombers. Wait until those fighters were low on fuel, and then engage. German pilots weren't just fighting P-51s. They were fighting P-51s while running out of fuel. The combination was lethal. Grabman provided specific examples. On March 24, 1945, a force of 47 Me-109K4s, Germany's latest fighter variant, intercepted a bomber formation near Nuremberg. After 11 minutes of combat, they broke off. Standard procedure. They had maybe 20 minutes of fuel remaining, just enough to return to base. But P-51s from the 357th Fighter Group were waiting. Waiting specifically for that moment. They engaged at 4:18 p.m. The combat lasted 7 minutes. 23 Me-109s were destroyed, not all from combat. 11 crashed, attempting emergency landings, because they ran out of fuel. During the engagement, 4 pilots bailed out successfully. 7 died in the crashes. The P-51s lost 0 aircraft, not a single one, because they had 90 minutes of fuel remaining. They could afford to fight. German pilots couldn't. And the Americans knew it, used it, exploited it with surgical precision. Advantage 2, speed and altitude performance. The P-51D had a maximum speed of 437 mph at 25,000 feet, service ceiling 41,900 feet. The Me-109K4, Germany's answer, could hit 452 mph at 19,685 feet, service ceiling 41,000 feet. On paper, the 109 was slightly faster at low altitude, But here's the critical detail that Grabman emphasized: the P-51. It consistently delivered superior performance at the altitudes where the dogfights actually happened. American bombers typically cruised at 25,000 to 28,000 feet. At those heights, the P-51 boasted a clear speed advantage, a maneuverability advantage, and most critically, could maintain its combat power. While German fighters struggled, the thin air severely impacting their engine performance. The Mi-109's theoretical superiority at 19,685 feet became completely irrelevant, because the real combat took place at 25,000 feet, where the P-51 reigned supreme. But there's something particularly chilling in Major General Grabman's analysis, something that reveals the true devastation. He wrote, and I quote, "Our pilots report that P-51s can choose whether to fight or disengage at will. When the situation favors them, they engage. When it doesn't, they simply outrun our fighters." This inverts the fundamental assumption of air combat. The P-51 controls the engagement. We respond. They dictate. We react. This represents not a tactical disadvantage, but a strategic impossibility. We cannot win a war where the enemy chooses every fight, and we are forced to accept their terms every single time. Think about the implications of that statement. Every single engagement happened on American terms. P-51 pilots assessed their fuel state, their altitude, their position, the number of enemy aircraft, and then decided, do we fight now or wait for better conditions? German pilots had no such luxury. They either engaged immediately, or the bombers would reach their targets unhindered. The Americans could bide their time, waiting for the perfect opportunity. Germany couldn't. That's not a fair fight. That's a systematic executon, masquerading as combat. Advantage number 3. And this is where Major General Grabman's analysis becomes almost tragic: armament and reliability. The P-51D carried 6 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, total ammunition 1,380 rounds, fire rate 800 rounds per minute per gun, that's 4,800 rounds per minute, combined jamming rate a staggeringly low 0.3%. The Mi-109 K4 carried one 30mm Mk108 cannon and two 13mm MG-131 machine guns. The 30mm cannon, it was devastating when it hit. Problem: it hit rarely. Its muzzle velocity was so low that deflection shooting was nearly impossible. And the jamming rate, 8 to 12%. Major General Grabman documented combat reports where German pilots achieved perfect firing positions on P-51s, and their 30mm cannon jammed, or worse, fired 3 rounds and jammed. One pilot, Lieutenant Franz Weber, filed a report after combat on April 3, 1945. He achieved a firing position on a P-51 at 300 yards. A textbook deflection shot, pulled the trigger, 3 rounds fired, jam. By the time he cleared it, the P-51 had rolled, and the pilot's wingman was on his tail. Weber survived by diving away, but he wrote in his after-action report, "American reliability defeated German firepower. Their guns always work. Ours work sometimes. In combat, sometimes equals never." But wait. Because what Major General Grabman revealed next explains why Operational Order 1124F wasn't just tactical, it was psychological surrender, documented in an official military order. Advantage number 4, pilot training. Major General Grabman had access to American pilot training records captured from downed aircrews, and what he discovered broke German morale at the command level. American P-51 pilots were entering combat with an average of 450 flying hours. 450 hours of actual flight time. Before seeing combat, German pilots, in April 1945, were entering combat with 47 flying hours. Some had as few as 30 hours. The disparity was 10-1 in flight time. But it was worse than that. American training wasn't just longer, it was better. American pilots practiced gunnery against towed targets until they achieved a 25% hit rate at 300 yards. German pilots, by 1945, were receiving almost no gunnery training because ammunition was needed for combat operations. American pilots practiced formation flying, dogfighting, emergency procedures, navigation, instrument flying. German pilots got basic takeoff and landing instruction and were sent to combat. Major General Grabman included a heartbreaking detail. He analyzed combat reports from new German pilots. Their average survival time in combat, 7.4 missions. 7 missions, then killed, captured, or wounded badly enough to be removed from service. 47 hours of training produced pilots who survived 7 missions, on average. American pilots, with 450 hours of training, had survival rates over 85%. Germany was feeding teenage boys with minimal training into combat against professional pilots with 10 times more preparation, and everyone at command level knew it. Knew they were sending those kids to die, knew the training disparity made survival impossible, but they had no choice. The Eastern Front was collapsing. The Western Front was collapsing. They needed warm bodies in cockpits. And here's the detail that made Operational Order 1124F inevitable. Major General Grabman calculated that it took American industry 14,800 man-hours to build one P-51 Mustang. In April 1945, it took 450 hours to train a pilot to fly it effectively. That's 15,250 man-hours total. Germany was expending 28,000 man-hours to build an Me-109K4 and getting pilots with 47 hours of training. The Americans were producing better aircraft, faster, and training better pilots, faster. The mathematics were apocalyptic, and Major General Grabman knew it. He wrote, "We are losing the production war, the training war, the reliability war, the performance war, and most devastatingly, the psychology war. Our pilots know they are facing superior aircraft, flown by superior trained pilots with superior reliability. This knowledge affects combat effectiveness more than any specification sheet." Advantage number 5, numbers. In April 1945, the USAAF had approximately 3,700 operational P-51 Mustangs in Europe. The Luftwaffe had approximately 2,100 operational fighters of all types. Germany was outnumbered 1.8-1. Just by P-51s alone, when you added P-47 Thunderbolts, P-38 Lightnings, British Spitfires, and Tempests, the ratio became 6.4-1. But numbers alone don't explain Operational Order 1124F. It was the combination, superior numbers of superior aircraft, flown by superior trained pilots, with superior reliability, supported by superior logistics. Major General Grabman calculated that for every German fighter that took off, an average of 2.8 American fighters were airborne over Germany. The sky was full of American aircraft, and roughly 40% were P-51 Mustangs. Everywhere German pilots looked, there were Mustangs. But here's the detail that broke morale: American replacement rates. If the Luftwaffe destroyed 100 American fighters in combat, 100 new aircraft arrived within 72 hours. If America lost 100 pilots, 100 new, fully trained pilots arrived within 1 week. Germany? if they lost 100 aircraft. They might replace 30 within a month. If they lost 100 pilots, they got 40 replacements with inadequate training within 3 weeks. The attrition spiral was irreversible. Every day Germany got weaker, every day America got stronger, and the trend was accelerating, not stabilizing. Advantage number 6, logistics and maintenance. This is where Grabman's analysis becomes almost painfully to read. American P-51 squadrons achieved an astounding 85% operational readiness in April 1945. That means a staggering 85% of their aircraft were flyable at any given moment. German fighter units, by comparison, averaged a mere 47% operational readiness. More than half of Germany's fighters were grounded, sidelined by maintenance issues, lack of spare parts, or critically, a lack of fuel. But the stark reality was even worse than the numbers suggest. American ground crews, with their standardized procedures, could replace a Packard Merlin engine in a breathtaking 47 minutes. German ground crews, on the other hand, needed a grueling 8 hours to replace a Daimler-Benz DB605 engine, and often lacked the proper tools or the necessary replacement parts. American squadrons boasted complete spare parts inventories. German squadrons, in desperation, cannibalized damaged aircraft, stripping them bare to keep others flying, a grim testament to their dwindling resources. Grabman even included a photograph in his analysis, a captured American P-51 maintenance facility at a forward airfield. The photo showed shelf after shelf of spare parts, organized with meticulous care, labeled with precision, and plentiful beyond belief. He wrote underneath, in stark, unforgettable words, "This is why we lose. Their logistics is better than our combat operations." His point was devastatingly clear. America was winning the war with logistics, with meticulously managed supply chains, with standardized parts and rigorously trained mechanics, and comprehensive inventories that anticipated every need. Germany was losing because even when they had superior aircraft and highly skilled pilots, they simply couldn't keep them in the air. The P-51 triumphed because it could be maintained in the field. By mechanics who had mastered standardized procedures, the Me-109 faltered because it required experienced technicians who knew the unique quirks of that specific airframe. And then there's advantage number 7, the one that made Operational Order 1124F absolutely inevitable: morale. Grabman's analysis included searing interviews with 47 Luftwaffe pilots, all captured between February and April 1945. He asked them one deceptively simple question: would you rather engage P-51 Mustangs or any other Allied fighter type? 47 pilots. 47 answered with the same chilling dread: anything but Mustangs. One pilot in particular, Hauptmann Otto Kraus, a seasoned veteran with 38 aerial victories, explained why, with stark candor, the P-51 represents everything we've lost. Range we simply cannot match, reliability we can never achieve, training time we can no longer afford, production capacity we never had. When I see those contrails at 28,000 feet, I know I'm fighting the entire American industrial economy. Not one pilot, the factory that built his aircraft, the school that trained him, the supply chain that keeps him flying, the economy that can afford to give him 450 hours of training. That's what I'm fighting, and I simply cannot win that fight. That quote, a chilling epitaph for the Luftwaffe's hopes, appears on page 19 of Grabman's analysis, and underneath, Grabman wrote, in words that resonate with profound despair, "This is why Operational Order 1124F is necessary. Our pilots know they cannot win. Knowledge of inevitable defeat, affects performance more than any technical disadvantage. We are ordering them to avoid P-51s, not because it is militarily sound, but because it is psychologically necessary. If we order them to engage, they go knowing they will probably die. If we order them to avoid, they go knowing they might survive. The directive is not military strategy, it is battlefield mercy. Read that again. Battlefield mercy. The commanding general of Luftwaffe fighter operations admitting that Operational Order 1124F was an act of mercy. That ordering pilots to run away from P-51s was the more humane option. Compared to condemning them to fight aircraft they knew were hopelessly superior, and he documented it, put it in writing, attached it to an operational order, because he felt compelled to explain both to himself and to history why Germany's once vaunted air force ended the war with an official order that effectively said, "Run away." But now comes the moment that makes this story truly devastating. Because Grabman's analysis contained one more section, a section that remained classified, shrouded in secrecy until 1993, specifically because of what it revealed about the utter psychological collapse of German command in April 1945. On page 21, Grabman chillingly calculated how many days Germany could sustain combat operations against overwhelming Allied air superiority. His methodology was brutally straightforward. Current pilot loss rate, 18 pilots killed or captured per day. Current replacement rate, a meager 7 pilots per day. Net loss, a staggering 11 pilots per day. Current operational fighters, 2,100. Current loss rate, 47 aircraft destroyed per day. Replacement rate, a pathetic 19 aircraft per day. Net loss, a crippling 28 aircraft per day. He ran the cold, hard mathematics. At current loss rates, the Luftwaffe would cease to exist as an operational force by May 17, 1945. Just 28 days from the date he penned the analysis, not dramatically defeated in some climactic, decisive battle, just arithmetically eliminated, ground down by relentless attrition that far exceeded replacement rates. And then, Grabman asked a question that lays bare the complete psychological disintegration. He wrote, his words echoing with profound despair, "If we know the Luftwaffe will cease to exist by May 17th, regardless of our actions, what is the purpose of sacrificing pilots in the next 28 days? How do we justify ordering men to die in combat? When we know that combat cannot change the outcome?" He didn't provide an answer, because, in truth, there was no answer. Germany had irrevocably lost the air war. The Luftwaffe knew it. The pilots knew it. The question wasn't whether they would lose. The question was, how many more pilots would needlessly die between that agonizing moment and the inevitable end? And Operational Order 1124F, in its brutal honesty, was Grabman's answer. Avoid P-51 Mustangs at all costs. Preserve what little remained. Prolong the dwindling existence of the Luftwaffe for those final, desperate 28 days. By refusing to engage in battles that were manifestly unwinnable. It wasn't strategy. It was triage. It was a commander desperately trying to keep some pilots alive, just until the inevitable surrender that everyone knew was looming. And here's what makes this historically crucial. On April 19, 1945, when Major General Grabman signed Operational Order 1124F, he knew with chilling certainty that he was signing the Luftwaffe's death certificate. He understood, with heartbreaking clarity, that an air force that officially orders its pilots to run away from enemy fighters has effectively ceased to be an air force at all. It's simply a collection of men sitting in aircraft, waiting for the war to finally grind to its inevitable, bitter end. And he painstakingly documented why. Documented the 7 critical advantages that made the P-51 utterly unbeatable. Documented the relentless mathematics that showed that defeat was not merely probable, but absolutely inevitable. Documented the psychological devastation that made continued resistance utterly meaningless. He didn't do this for short-sighted military reasons. He did it for history, so that someday someone would read that analysis and understand that the Luftwaffe didn't lose because German pilots lacked courage. They lost because they were pitted against a social and industrial system that could build 15,000 P-51 Mustangs, while simultaneously training pilots for a staggering 450 hours, while maintaining an almost unbelievable 85% operational readiness rate, while replacing losses faster than Germany could inflict them. They lost, in the end, to American industrial democracy. And no amount of individual courage, no amount of skill, could ever hope to overcome that overwhelming advantage. But wait. Because the haunting story of Operational Order 1124F doesn't simply end on April 19th, 1945. There's one more document, one more classified file, that remained shrouded in secrecy until 1993, and it chillingly reveals what actually happened when German pilots received that fateful order, when they were officially and unequivocally told, in black and white, run away from P-51 Mustangs. On April 20th, 1945, Major Heinz Bahr, the 3rd highest scoring German ace with a staggering 220 victories, received Operational Order 1124F at his unit headquarters. He immediately called a meeting of his pilots, 17 men, ranging in age from 19 to 28. Their combined victories totaled 247. He read them the order. The room fell silent. Then Lieutenant Werner Schmidt, barely 19 years old with 7 victories to his name, raised his hand and posed a question so profound it was recorded in the unit records. Bahr included it in his report that very evening. Schmidt asked, "Sir, if we're ordered to avoid combat with P-51 Mustangs, and P-51 Mustangs escort every bomber formation, aren't we being ordered to avoid combat entirely? How do we defend Germany if we're ordered to run away?" Bahr's response is meticulously documented. He stated plainly, "We don't defend Germany. We survive. Those are our orders now. Survive. The war is over. We just haven't surrendered yet. When you see a P-51, you turn around. You fly away. You land. You live one more day. That's the mission now. Survival until the shooting stops." Bahr, that evening, filed a comprehensive report documenting that unsettling conversation. He concluded the report with a single, stark sentence: Operational Order 1124F is not an operational order. It is permission to stop dying for nothing. And that's what Operational Order 1124F truly was. Permission to stop. Permission for German pilots to preserve their lives instead of pointlessly sacrificing themselves in combat that everyone knew was utterly futile. The P-51 Mustang didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe militarily, it crushed them psychologically. It forced them to acknowledge that continuing the fight was nothing more than senseless murder, not warfare. Ordering pilots to engage P-51s was, in essence, sentencing them to death without a purpose. And Operational Order 1124F was, in its own way, Germany's admission of defeat without ever uttering the word surrender. It was surrender by euphemism, surrender by tactical directive, surrender by ordering pilots to actively avoid combat. With an aircraft they simply could not beat, And here's why this matters, why you need to remember April 19th, 1945 and Operational Order 1124F. Because it proves something that Major General Grabman meticulously documented in his analysis. A truth that took historians decades to fully grasp. The P-51 Mustang didn't win the air war over Europe because it was merely a good aircraft. It won because it represented a social system that Germany simply could not match. Every single P-51 carried with it a minimum of 450 hours of pilot training, something Germany could no longer afford. It adhered to reliability standards that German manufacturing could no longer consistently maintain. It benefited from a logistics support system that German supply chains could no longer adequately provide. It boasted replacement rates that German industry could no longer even remotely match. And most devastatingly of all, it carried the unwavering psychological certainty that American industrial capacity was, quite literally, inexhaustible, that every P-51 shot down would be replaced by two more, that every pilot killed in action would be replaced by another, with the same grueling 450 hours of intensive training, that the supply of P-51 Mustangs, and the skilled pilots to fly them, and the dedicated mechanics to maintain them, and the robust supply chains to fully support them, was, for all intents and purposes, infinite. Germany wasn't just fighting aircraft. They were fighting the raw, unstoppable industrial capacity of American democracy itself. They were fighting Buffalo Tank Corporation, churning out an astounding 6,200 drop tanks per month. They were fighting North American aviation, relentlessly producing 300 P-51s per month. They were fighting the countless training schools, graduating over 800 highly skilled pilots monthly. They were fighting an economic powerhouse that could simultaneously wage a brutal two-ocean war and raise civilian living standards. And Operational Order 1124F was the precise moment when Germany's military command finally admitted to themselves that they simply could not win that fight. The operational order that explicitly said, avoid P-51 Mustangs. The operational order that really meant we have lost to American democracy. And we're now just counting down the days until we can officially admit it. So, if this piece of history resonates with you, if the revelation that the Luftwaffe officially ordered its pilots to run and hide from P-51 Mustangs fills you with a sense of pride for what American industry so triumphantly accomplished, then there's a tangible way to honor that accomplishment. You've just uncovered something that remained officially classified for a staggering 48 long years. The 23-page analysis, where a German Major General painstakingly explained why American industrial democracy was utterly unbeatable. The harrowing interviews with seasoned pilots who openly confess they'd rather fight anything except Mustangs. The cold, hard arithmetic that starkly showed the Luftwaffe would effectively cease to exist by May 17, 1945. The devastating psychological collapse documented in an official military directive. Corporate documentaries simply won't tell you this story. They'll show you exciting dogfights and dramatic gun camera footage. They won't show you Major General Grabman somberly writing battlefield mercy to painstakingly explain why he ordered his pilots to run away. They won't show you the complex mathematics that made Operational Order 1124F absolutely inevitable. That's what this channel does. Finds the classified documents, shows you the in-depth analysis, proves that American democracy defeated German tyranny, not just with better aircraft, but with better everything. Super thanks isn't just a simple act of support, it's you emphatically stating that these documents matter. Grabman's insightful analysis matters. The powerful testimony of Hauptmann Kraus matters. The insightful question from Lieutenant Schmidt matters. The poignant response from Major Barr matters. It loudly tells YouTube that real history, backed by meticulously researched classified sources, matters far more than algorithm-friendly content. It tells me to keep relentlessly searching for these hidden documents, keep rigorously showing the underlying mathematics, keep relentlessly proving how democracy triumphed, and it clearly tells other viewers that somebody believes this historical narrative deserves to be remembered. You're not just simply supporting a channel, you're actively preserving the detailed analysis that Germany's own generals painstakingly wrote, explaining precisely why they lost to American industry. That deserves super thanks, because when you actively support this endeavor, you're ensuring that future generations fully understand that Operational Order 1124F wasn't just a mere tactical order. It was a psychological surrender, meticulously documented in stark military language. It was the Luftwaffe openly admitting that one American aircraft type broke them so completely that their final desperate order was, "Run away." That story deserves to be told. Those critical documents deserve to be shared. That history deserves super thanks. Team P-51 Mustang versus Team every other WW2 fighter. Drop your choice below and explain why. If you genuinely believe another aircraft was superior, make your case with compelling evidence. If you agree that the legendary Mustang truly earned Operational Order 1124F, explain what, in your opinion, makes it the greatest fighter of the entire war. Let's debate this respectfully below, because that respectful debate ultimately honors everyone who diligently designed, meticulously built, bravely flew, and expertly maintained these incredible aircraft. Drop your vote. Make your argument. Let's remember, together,